Hello, I'm Chuck Phillip, and welcome to part 4 of my Southern Stories edition on Fairhope, Alabama. And this is one of my favorite topics here, and that's the Fairhope Pier. I've been going to this structure all my life, and so we're about to take a right onto Magnolia Avenue off of Section Street. Now, you can go further up to Fairhope Avenue, and that can also take you to the pier. It'll connect back up down here. And so most people probably go the Magnolia Avenue route because if you're heading from I-10 this direction, it's the closest to do that. And so you can see these streets to the side. They will take you to Fairhope Avenue and also to the heart of downtown Fairhope. It's also very scenic down this road as well, and I can see why they probably call this Magnolia Avenue, because there's a lot of old magnolias along this road, all through Fairhope for that matter. In fact, there's a lot of these old trees on Organic School. It's where I went to school from 69 to 75. And a lot of these houses have been here for probably right about 100 years, some maybe longer. Now, there's a square there to the left you can see that's been empty as far as I can remember back, and I think it's like a park that you can, it's kind of grown up in some places, so I guess it's kind of subjective whether or not you can go into that. I think there's some trails in it. And so we're about to intersect with Fairhope Avenue. That's where it comes into. You can see these people walking across the street there with their dog. And you can see across the road right there, and that's where Scenic 98 picks back up. It's right there. That'll take you down to the Point Clear, also to the Grand Hotel. There's also some good restaurants up that way too. Gambino's is a real good place to eat. The American Legion has some really good entertainment. So we're heading down to the pier. Now, it's a pretty little steep incline. You can see they've got a sidewalk there on the right. So you can park all along Magnolia Avenue if there's a big function going on. You need extra parking. It's available at the top of the hill. And so, you know, this place to the right, it's been a series of different restaurants over the years. And I believe that's been there since the 60s, but I don't think there's anything in there now. Now, during the summertime, you will, when you're going down this way, there's usually this guard post is occupied, and so you'll either have to pay to get into this thing, or you'll have to have a sticker on your windshield if you're a resident of Fairhope. And so that's just kind of how that works out, because we're out of season right now, so the guard's not there. And by the way, this was done on New Year's Day, so I don't know, how often this is occupied. And so this has been down here, this peninsula is what I like to call it. It's really not, because it's right down here at the bottom of the base of the bluff. But this has pretty much remained the same for as long as I can remember. Like I said, I've been going down here in a car since the 70s. Now, back during that time, this was not paved. It was all dirt, so you could actually get stuck down here depending on what kind of car you had, and depending on how wet it got. You can see there's some erosion going on right there at the bluff, which is, common to this area because the bluff is so steep. And of course, it don't take a whole lot of rainfall to actually cause some of this as well. But we've had some places along this bluff, but this bluff goes all the way to Spanish Fort. So, it's been other areas where people's lost their backyards due to erosion problems. Now, this goes a pretty long ways. It just goes into a big loop. And so a lot of people come down here and ride their bicycles. It's actually a good place to walk. It'd be good if they had a sidewalk on the right side of this or left side, either or, just to keep you out of the traffic. But usually most people abide by some restroom area. We're just passed right there, so you can actually use the restroom there. So if you had these sidewalks on either side, to kind of keep you out of the traffic, but you can walk this grass with relatively ease. I did that in some parts of this. They've got some cuts over there in case you don't want to go all the way down to the end of this. And so there's been some ducks and geese that hang out in these little ponds, these natural ponds that are usually spring fed. And I think there's a rule about not feeding those. And it's also possible you could run into some alligators and some water moccasins into this as well. Because this is right there in their habitat, and it may be surprising to you as well to know is a lot of these water moccasins actually get in the bluff. And so if you're planning on hiking into that, I'd be mindful about that. And so it's also a crime to feed alligators as well, because what happens is when you feed them, that's when they start losing their fear of humans. So resist the temptation of doing that if you happen to run across one. And like I say, it is illegal to do. I think it's like a $500 fine if you was to feed alligators down here. But most of those alligators are going to be found, even though they could be found down here as far as Fairhope, most of them are going to be further north of this, especially around Spanish Fort and the Blakely area up there. And so you can see this little ditch to the left right there. It looks like it's full of rainwater, but a lot of that is spring water there. You can see it gets real close to the beach on this right side. Now, at one time, this was actually a good place to go skimboarding, depending on where the water piled up. Because if the water could get like 1 to 2 inches deep, and if it was long enough, you could actually go out here and do some pretty good skimboarding. I don't see anybody doing that anymore. In fact, I tried to do a Google search of that, and I couldn't find any images to that either. And so maybe that was just something exclusive to Organic School, but it can't be. Because it was just too cool a thing to do. So I'd imagine there was other places that did this. So, but anyway, we're coming back toward the pier now. So we're heading south on this other side toward the beachfront, and there's plenty of parking on this side. In fact, most of your parking is going to be on the beach side of this. And this can get pretty crowded down here during the summertime, so, I guess it's going to depend on what time of year it is. It's going to determine what the parking lot is going to be like here as well. Now, this pavilion here on the right, you can see we're crossing back over some blowout there from the bluff, is actually, you could actually lay claim to that. I think you may have to get a reservation for it as well. You can see that this beach here is kind of a brown-orange color, and that's because of the bay. And that you have the white sands down at the Gulf, and this sand is actually that as well. It's just been tinted by the brown color of the bay. And those piers out there, I used to go crabbing on them back in the day, and I guess you can still fish and crab off of them now. Of course, you have to have a saltwater fishing license to do that too. So I haven't kept up with all the new fishing regulations. But I guess you're planning to do that, you probably are going to have to get a saltwater license to utilize those piers for that. All right, we're heading out of the park now, or the beachfront park as I call it. Going up here past the guard shack. And like I say, you'll have to pay to get in this, I think, during the summer months, unless you have a window decal. I think the people of Fairhope can get that as a residence, and it allows you free parking into this and use of it. And so we're coming out. You got be a little bit careful coming out, because sometimes people don't want to yield coming in around the circle. And also, I'll go slow through this because sometimes people back out and they can't see, and you can run into the back of them. And usually there's pretty good parking all the way around this. And I happened to get a little bit lucky on this day and managed to get a spot right in the front. Now, back in the day, or in the 70s, when I was a teenager, this was a big hangout for all of us kids, because if you lived in Spanish Fort back then, we only had a elementary school. And so you went to elementary there, and then the Daphne Middle School, and then the Fairhope High. And Daphne didn't have a high school either. And so people who lived in Daphne and Spanish Fort, we all went to Fairhope High School, with the exception of me. I went to Organic School in Fairhope. And so as a result, they had a lot of mutual friends that went to Fairhope High School. So even the people that lived in Fairhope, had friends that lived in Daphne and Spanish Fort. So it was a pretty good common place for students to hang out on the weekend. Even though I went to Organic School, I had friends that went to Fairhope High. And so this was the hangout back in the day. And I don't know about so much anymore. I think the hangout part of this kind of ended in the 80s when Daphne got a high school, and then Spanish Fort later on. But I've still liked coming down here pretty much all my adult life. And I also like to read your comments about this as well. This is going to be just part one of this. I'm going to do a second part on the pier itself, because I've got some pretty interesting stories about that. And thanks for taking the time to watch this, guys. And leave your comments below, because we all like to read them. Take care.